This is an invitation to take part virtually in a ceremony of remembrance for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it is a reflection of the ceremony held here at Lithia Park in Ashland, Oregon on the morning of August 6th, 2025. The ceremony was presided over by the organization Peace House, local clergy, and the mayor of Ashland, who is a member of Mayors for Peace for a world without nuclear weapons. Peace House recognizes the location of the gathering as taking place on Shasta, Takelma, and Lakgawa ancestral lands, and acknowledges the suffering colonization brought to these people. The land we now call Lithia was traditionally a meeting place for these people too, due to their shared appreciation and respect for the healing spring waters. Sit comfortably and join in on this ceremony. "80 years ago, at 8:15 a.m. on August 6th, the United States released an atomic bomb over Hiroshima, and life in the city came to a stop. Three days later, at 11:02 a.m., Nagasaki was hit as well. In October 2024, Terumi Tanaka of Nihon Hidankyo, the Japan Confederation of A and H bomb sufferers organizations, received the Nobel Peace Prize. Here is an excerpt from his speech entitled Voice of the Hibakusha. There still remain 12,000 nuclear warheads on the Earth today, 4,000 of which are operationally deployed, ready for immediate launch. The nuclear superpower, Russia, threatens to use nuclear weapons in its war against Ukraine, and a cabinet member of Israel, in the midst of its unrelenting attacks on Gaza and Palestine, even spoke of the possible use of nuclear arms. In addition to the civilian casualties, I am infinitely saddened and angered that the nuclear taboo threatens to be broken. I am one of the survivors of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki. At the time, I was 13 years old, at home, around 3 kilometers east of Ground Zero. It was August 9th, 1945. I suddenly heard the buzzing sound of a bomber jet and was soon after engulfed in a bright white light. Surprised, I ran downstairs and got down on the floor, covering my eyes and ears with my hands. The next moment, an intense shockwave passed through our entire house. I have no memory of that moment, but when I came to my senses, I found myself under a large glass sliding door. It was a miracle that none of the glass was broken, and I was somehow spared injuries. 3 days later, I sought out the families of my 2 aunts who lived in the area near the hypocenter. It was then that I saw the full devastation of the bombing of Nagasaki. Walking with my mother, we went around a small mountain. Reaching a pass, we looked down in horror. Blackened ruins spread out as far as the port of Nagasaki, some 3 kilometers away. Urakami Cathedral, the largest brick church in the east, had collapsed to the ground, leaving no trace. All the houses along the path, down to the foot of the mountain, were burnt to the ground, and corpses lay scattered around them. Many people who were badly injured or burned, but still alive, were left unattended, with no help whatsoever. I became almost devoid of emotion, somehow closing off my sense of humanity, and simply headed intently for my destination. I found the charred body of one aunt at the remains of her house 400 meters from the hypocenter, along with the body of her grandson, a university student. The other aunt's house had collapsed and become a pile of wood. My grandfather was crouched down on the brink of death, with severe burns all over his body. My aunt had been severely burned and died just before we arrived. We then cremated her remains with our own hands. My uncle, who was initially most unharmed, had left the area to seek help, yet we later learned that he had collapsed at a rescue station and died after suffering from a high fever for a week. Thus, one single atomic bomb transformed 5 of my relatives so mercilessly, taking all of their lives in one fell swoop. The deaths I witnessed at that time could hardly be described as human deaths. There were hundreds of people suffering in agony, unable to receive any kind of medical attention. I strongly felt that even in war, such killing and maiming must never be allowed to happen. It is the heartfelt desire of the Hibakusha that, rather than depending on the theory of nuclear deterrence, which assumes the possession and use of nuclear weapons, we must not allow the possession of a single nuclear weapon. Please try to imagine there are 4,000 nuclear warheads ready to be launched immediately. This means that damage hundreds or thousands of times greater than that which happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki could happen right away. Any one of you could become either a victim or a perpetrator at any time. I therefore plead for everyone around the world to discuss together what we must do to eliminate nuclear weapons and demand action from governments to achieve this goal. The average age of the A-bomb survivors is now 85. 10 years from now, there may only be a handful of us able to give testimony as first-hand survivors. From now on, I hope that the next generation will find ways to build on our efforts and develop the movement even further. The organization Back from the Brink offers 5 policy solutions, calling on the United States to lead a global effort to prevent nuclear war. 1. Pursue global elimination. Pursue a verifiable agreement among nuclear-armed states to eliminate their nuclear arsenals. Given the extraordinary destructive power of nuclear weapons, it should be the highest U.S. national security priority to seek the elimination of these weapons, those possessed by other countries and those in our own arsenal. Even our own nuclear weapons pose an existential threat to our survival. Recent studies have shown that the use of any significant portion of our nuclear arsenals against cities, even against an adversary who never fired back, could cause worldwide climate disruption and global famine. The United States needs to initiate negotiations with all of the nuclear weapon states on a verifiable agreement to eliminate these weapons. The United States, like Britain, China, France, and Russia, is already obligated under Article 6 of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to take concrete steps toward eliminating its nuclear arsenal. Nations that joined the NPT as non-nuclear weapon states, pledging that they would not develop their own nuclear weapons, did so in part on the basis of this promise of disarmament. These states have become increasingly frustrated at the lack of progress among the nuclear weapons states toward meeting their treaty obligations. The U.S. and the other 8 nuclear-armed nations should live up to their responsibility to begin negotiations now for a verifiable, enforceable, time-bound agreement to dismantle nuclear weapons. Only 9 countries in the world have nuclear weapons, but if nuclear war were to break out, the effects would impact the whole world. Radioactive fallout could spread across the globe. Economic fallout would have global repercussions. Climatological fallout, known as nuclear winter, could last for decades. Even countries that aren't involved politically could be devastated. So shouldn't countries without nuclear weapons get a say in their use? 2. Renounce first use. Renounce the option of using nuclear weapons first. The United States has never renounced the right to use nuclear weapons first. This increases the chance that a conflict could escalate to nuclear war. The United States should instead declare that it will never be the first to use nuclear weapons. The Trump administration's nuclear posture review broadens the range of scenarios that might lead to the first use of U.S. nuclear weapons. These, it says, include but are not limited to attack on the U.S., allied or partners' civilian population or infrastructure, and attacks on U.S. or allied nuclear forces, their command and control, or warning and attack assessment capabilities. Substantially broadening the range of circumstances under which the United States would consider the first use of nuclear weapons is a step in the wrong direction. It makes a nuclear war more likely by reducing the threshold for nuclear use. It makes it far more likely that an adversary facing the threat of U.S. nuclear weapons may decide that it needs to be the first to take this step. Given the overwhelming strength of its conventional military, the United States has nothing to gain from escalating a conflict to the nuclear level. Indeed, the United States and the world have everything to lose. The United States should declare that it will never be the first to use nuclear weapons and would use them only in response to a previous nuclear attack. Of course, the goal of Back from the Brink is the complete elimination of nuclear weapons, but as long as they exist, a no first use declaration would reduce the likelihood that tensions or conventional conflict with another nuclear-armed state would escalate to nuclear use. The bicameral No First Use Act, introduced by Representative Adam Smith and Senator Elizabeth Warren in January 2020, would establish in law that it is the policy of the United States not to use nuclear weapons first. If this bill were to become law, it would officially accomplish the first policy step of Back from the Brink. So we encourage everyone to contact the members of Congress and encourage them to co-sponsor the bill. 3. End sole authority. End the sole unchecked authority of any U.S. president to launch a nuclear attack. Currently, there is no check on the president's authority to order the use of nuclear weapons, either first or in response to a nuclear attack. If the president decided to launch a nuclear strike, he or she would simply notify the military of this decision. The president may consult advisors, but this is not required, and no one has the authority to countermand a legal launch order. This system is risky and unjustified. There are practical ways to include multiple decision makers in authorizing the use of nuclear weapons, and the United States should adopt such changes. Presidential sole authority is an artifact of the Cold War, when the greatest fear was a massive, bolt-from-the-blue first strike by the Soviet Union that would wipe out the United States missiles before it had a chance to retaliate. But this system is risky and unjustified. No single individual should be able to make such a momentous decision. There are practical ways that the process can be changed to include multiple decision makers in authorizing the use of nuclear weapons, and the United States should adopt such changes. 4. End hair trigger alerts. Take U.S. nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. The United States has roughly 1,700 deployed nuclear weapons and another several thousand in reserve. 400 of these are on missiles in underground silos, ready to be launched within minutes of a presidential order. This alert status, called hair trigger alert, increases the chance of a launch in response to a false alarm. There have been numerous close calls over the past 40 years due to both human and technical errors, and keeping missiles on high alert increases the danger of accidental war. There is no compelling rationale for maintaining this option. The United States should remove its missiles from hair trigger alert. This risky alert status, coupled with the option of ordering a launch based on warning of an incoming attack, increases the chance that a nuclear war could start due to a false alarm or other error. Maintaining hair trigger alert options leads to unnecessarily rushed decision-making. A land-based missile can travel between Russia and the United States in about 30 minutes, and a submarine-launched missile could take as little as 10 to 15 minutes. After receiving warning of an attack, military and political leaders would have only minutes to assess the credibility of this information and decide how to respond. This time pressure increases the danger of ordering a launch based on faulty information, and over the past 40 years, there have been numerous examples of close calls due to computer or human error. Hair trigger alert is an outdated policy. The original rationale was the fear during the Cold War that either side could launch a surprise first strike that might wipe out its adversary's ability to retaliate, which at that time largely consisted of land-based missiles and bombers. Today, such an attack is exceedingly unlikely, but even if the worst were to happen, the United States now deploys more than 1,000 nuclear warheads on submarine-based missiles hidden at sea. These sea-based missiles are not under the same pressure to be launched quickly as land-based missiles, and ensure that the United States would still be able to launch a retaliatory strike. There is no compelling reason to maintain U.S. missiles on hair trigger alert, and many reasons not to. Taking land-based missiles off high alert and removing rapid launch options from U.S. nuclear plans would reduce the risk of nuclear use. The fifth solution is to cancel enhanced weapons. Cancel the plan to replace the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal with enhanced weapons. Over the next 30 years, the United States plans to spend an estimated $1.7 trillion to replace its entire nuclear arsenal and the bombers, missiles, and submarines that delivers the weapons with more capable versions. Such a tremendous investment of money and effort is unnecessary. The U.S.'s current nuclear arsenal is more than sufficient to deter an attack, and indeed sufficient to destroy life on this planet as we know it many times over. And the conventional military deterrent is also sufficient to not need additional nuclear weapons or upgrades. In addition, according to many experts, nuclear modernization tremendously increases the risks of catastrophic cyber attacks on the U.S. nuclear weapons arsenal. As new technology is integrated into our nuclear command control and communications infrastructure, we inevitably draw our arsenal closer to the internet and other types of systems that can be hacked from afar by malicious state and non-state actors. Rebuilding the U.S. arsenal also sends a counterproductive message to the rest of the world by making it clear that the United States continues to see its nuclear arsenal as central to its security and intends to keep it for the foreseeable future. This will only encourage other states to believe that they also need to develop or improve their own nuclear arsenals, leading to dangerous proliferation and an accelerating arms race. Instead, the United States should de-emphasize the importance of nuclear weapons in its security policy, as it works with the other nuclear-armed states to eliminate these weapons altogether. The pleas for water, often described as victims crying out for water, are an agonizing and prominent detail in the accounts of the Hiroshima-Nagasaki bombing survivors. In Japan, pouring water over headstones is a ceremonial offering of relief to the deceased. I invite you to spend the rest of this video in meditation and reflection. Thank you.